November 3rd, 1943, 11:47 p.m., Bletchley Park, Station X, England. Margaret Lindsay, 16 years old, sat alone in Hut 8, her fingers frozen over a typewriter that shouldn't have been there. The intercepted German naval transmission in front of her was marked indecipherable discard. But Margaret saw something in the random letters that made her hands shake. A pattern the mathematicians had missed, a pattern that would kill her if she was wrong about breaking protocol. And if she was right, it would sink the entire U-boat Wolfpack, currently hunting convoy HX-263 in the North Atlantic. The paper trembled in her hands. Outside, November rain hammered against the windows. In 7 hours, 43 merchant ships would enter the kill zone. Before we continue with Margaret's incredible story, we need your help to keep these forgotten heroes alive. If you're already hooked by what you're hearing, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about real history. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of courage and innovation from World War II. And here's something we love. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Your country, your city. We have viewers from Buenos Aires to Berlin, from Manila to Montreal. Are you a veteran? Did your grandfather serve? Do you have a connection to this war? We want to hear from you. Now back to Bletchley Park, November 3rd, 1943. Where Margaret Lindsay was about to violate every rule that kept Station X secret. Margaret Lindsay was born in Kettering, Northamptonshire, on March 12, 1927. Her father worked at the shoe factory. Her mother took in laundry. Margaret was the youngest of 5 children in a 2-bedroom house where water had to be carried from the pump outside. She was 4 feet 11 inches tall, wore glasses held together with tape, and had never traveled more than 20 miles from home until the recruiter came to her school. She'd learned to type on a borrowed machine in the church basement. 40 words per minute at age 12, 70 by 14. The typing teacher, Mrs. Henderson, noticed that Margaret never looked at the keys. She watched the source document with an intensity that made Mrs. Henderson uncomfortable. Like she's reading underneath the words, Mrs. Henderson later told investigators. In March 1943, the Government Code and Cipher School at Bletchley Park needed typists. The mathematicians and code breakers generated thousands of pages daily. Someone had to transcribe the intercepts, type the decrypts, maintain the logs. Margaret was recruited at 15, started at 16. Her security clearance interview lasted 9 minutes. They asked if she could keep secrets. She said yes. They hired her the same day. Nobody told her what she'd be typing. The training officer said, "You type what you're given, you never read it, you never remember it. You forget it the moment your fingers leave the keys." Margaret nodded. But forgetting wasn't something Margaret could do. Between March and October 1943, the Kriegsmarine sank 412 Allied ships in the North Atlantic. The Wolfpacks operated with near impunity. British cryptanalysts at Bletchley Park had broken the German Enigma cipher in 1941. But in February 1943, the Germans introduced a 4th rotor to the U-boat Enigma variant. The machines at Bletchley, primitive computing devices called bombies, needed exponentially more time to crack 4-rotor messages, time the convoys didn't have. By November 1943, the average time to decrypt a U-boat message was 72 hours. The tactical orders directing Wolfpacks to convoys were usually transmitted 8 to 12 hours before attack. The mathematics were simple and fatal. The decrypts arrived 3 days after the ships were already at the bottom of the Atlantic. 17 codebreakers had requested reassignment from Hut 8, the naval section. The mental breakdown rate for Enigma cryptanalysts exceeded 40%. The work was impossible. The pressure was unbearable, and men kept dying while they failed. Lieutenant Commander Thomas Wickham was Margaret's supervisor. 28 years old, Cambridge mathematics, assigned to Bletchley in 1940. He'd broken his first Enigma variant in 1941. By 1943, the 4-rotor problem had aged him 20 years. He'd started drinking at his desk. Margaret typed his notes and watched him unravel. Wickham had a habit of talking to himself while working. Margaret heard everything, the mathematics of rotor positions, the frequency analysis of letter substitutions, the theories about German encoding procedures. She wasn't supposed to listen. She wasn't supposed to understand. But Margaret had a peculiar skill that nobody at Bletchley had thought to test. She could see patterns in chaos, not mathematical patterns, visual patterns. The way random letters formed shapes on the page. The way certain character combinations appeared in the same positions across multiple messages. While the cryptanalysts approached Enigma as a mathematical puzzle, Margaret saw it as something else entirely. She saw it the way she'd learned to see poorly printed hymn books in the church basement, by recognizing the shape of words before reading the individual letters. On November the 2nd, 1943, Margaret was typing intercepts in Hut 8 when Wickham received a priority message from Naval Intelligence. Convoy HX-263 was departing Halifax for Liverpool. 43 merchant ships, 8 escorts. Ultra Intelligence, the code name for Enigma decrypts, had identified Wolfpack Siegfried, 11 U-boats forming a patrol line across the convoy's projected route. But the Germans had changed their encoding procedure 3 days earlier. The bombs were grinding uselessly. The new variant was impenetrable. Wickham put his head in his hands. Margaret heard him whisper, "They're all going to die." That night, Margaret stayed late in Hut 8. She told the night supervisor she'd made typing errors that needed correction. After midnight, when the hut emptied for the shift change, she went to the discard bin. Messages marked indecipherable were kept for 24 hours, then burned. Margaret pulled 17 discarded U-boat intercepts from November 1st and 2nd. She spread them on Wickham's desk. She didn't try to decrypt them mathematically. She just looked at them. For 2 hours she stared at seemingly random German text. Her eyes moved across the pages, not reading, just observing. The way letters clustered. The way certain trigraphs, 3-letter combinations, appeared in similar positions. The human brain is pattern recognition machinery. Margaret's brain was particularly well-tuned. At 2:17 a.m. she saw it. The Germans had changed their rotor position protocol, but they'd made one mistake. The operators encoding messages were human. Humans developed habits, and one operator transmitting for U-592 had a habit. When beginning a new message, he set his rotors to spell German words, not random positions. Words. 3-letter German words that gave him an easy starting point. Margaret grabbed a German dictionary from Wickham's shelf. She started matching trigraphs from the intercepts to common 3-letter German words. Der, die, das, und die, mit. It was absurd. Professional cryptanalysis relied on mathematical frequency analysis, not guessing games. But Margaret wasn't a professional. She was a 16-year-old girl who'd learned to read by recognizing word shapes instead of sounding out letters. At 3:41 a.m. she found it. The operator was using Gundermann in German. He set his starting position to UND on a consistent rotor sequence. It was a tiny crack in the system, but it was enough. Margaret now knew the starting position for one operator's messages. With that, she could work backward through the Enigma's mechanical logic. She couldn't decrypt entire messages, but she could identify which rotor positions were being used. That information would reduce the bomb's search space from millions of possibilities to thousands. The machines could handle thousands. She pulled out her typewriter. She began writing a technical memo explaining her discovery. She had no authority to do this. Typists didn't write technical memos. Typists didn't analyze intercepts. Typists especially didn't go through discarded materials and develop cryptanalytic theories. What Margaret was doing would get her fired at minimum, investigated for security violations at worst. She was violating a dozen regulations. Her hands shook as she typed. The memo was 3 pages long. She documented the pattern. She identified the specific operator by transmission signature. She proposed feeding her rotor position findings to the bomb operators. She signed it, M. Lindsay, Typist, Hut 8. She left it on Wickham's desk. Then she went home, certain she'd destroyed her career. Wickham found the memo at 6:30 a.m. on November 3rd. He read it twice, not believing what he was reading. Then he ran to the bomb facility. The night shift was about to change. He handed Margaret's findings to the senior bomb operator, a woman named Catherine Walsh, who'd been running the machines for 2 years. "Try these rotor positions first," Wickham said. "Priority on any U-592 traffic." The bombs were electromechanical computers. each weighing over a ton, filled with rotating drums that mimicked Enigma rotors. They clattered constantly, testing letter combinations at high speed. The operators fed them possible rotor positions. The machines tested hundreds of combinations per minute, stopping when they found a match that produced sensible German text. At 9:13 a.m., bomb position 7 stopped. It had cracked a U-592 message transmitted at 4:47 a.m. that morning. The decrypt revealed tactical orders for Wolfpack Siegfried. The U-boats were forming their patrol line 340 miles west of Ireland. The patrol line coordinates were precise. The timing was precise. The convoy would enter the kill zone in 31 hours. Wickham stared at the decrypt. Then he looked at Catherine Walsh. "How did we break this?" "The typist's memo," Walsh said. "The rotor positions were exactly where she predicted." Wickham ran back to Hut 8. Margaret was at her desk, typing routine correspondence, trying to appear normal. Wickham grabbed her arm. "Come with me." In his office, he shut the door. "How did you know?" Margaret tried to explain about pattern recognition, about visual analysis, about seeing word shapes. It came out jumbled and confused. Wickham didn't care about the explanation. "Can you do it again?" "I don't know," Margaret said. "Maybe, if the same operator uses the same habit." "We need more intercepts from U-592, Wickham said, "and we need to identify other operators with habits. How long will it take?" "I need to see more messages," Margaret said. "All the discards from the last week." This was completely against protocol. Discarded intercepts were classified material. Typists had no clearance to review classified material, but convoy HX-263 was steaming toward a Wolfpack, and Wickham was past caring about protocol. He brought her 7 days of discarded 4-rotor intercepts, 93 messages marked indecipherable. Margaret spread them across every surface in Wickham's office. She started looking. By evening, she'd identified 3 more operators with habits. One used his girlfriend's initials. One used the same 3 letters he'd used in training. One used sequential rotor positions because he was lazy. It was all human error. The Enigma machine was mathematically sound, but the men operating the machines were fallible. Wickham took Margaret's findings to Commander Edward Travis, the operational head of Bletchley Park. Travis read the memo, looked at Margaret, a teenage girl in a worn dress and taped glasses, and said, "This is preposterous." "It works," Wickham said. He showed Travis the U-592 decrypt. Travis studied the decrypt for a long time. Then he looked at Margaret. "How old are you?" 16, sir." "And you're a typist?" "Yes, sir." "Can you break more messages?" "I think so, sir, if I can see the intercepts before they're discarded." Travis made a decision that violated every security protocol at Station X. "Effective immediately, Miss Lindsay has Level 3 clearance. She reports directly to Commander Wickham. She is authorized to review all intercepted U-boat traffic. This stays between the 3 of us." That night, Margaret began systematically analyzing German naval intercepts. She developed a notation system for operator habits. She catalogued transmission patterns. She identified 17 different operators across 8 U-boats. The bombs started cracking messages in hours instead of days. The tactical intelligence flowed to the Admiralty. The Admiralty rerouted convoys. On November 4, 1943, convoy HX-263 received orders to alter course 70 miles north of the planned route. Wolfpack Siegfried waited in position. The convoy never appeared. The U-boats searched for 2 days, then dispersed for lack of fuel. 43 merchant ships reached Liverpool without loss. Nobody in the convoy ever knew they'd been saved. Over the next 6 months, Margaret's techniques became standard procedure in Hut 8. Every discarded intercept was reviewed for operator patterns before destruction. The bombs ran Margaret's predicted rotor positions first. The average decrypt time for U-boat messages dropped from 72 hours to 11 hours. Tactical intelligence became actionable intelligence. The impact was measurable and immediate. Between November 1943 and May 1944, Allied convoy losses in the North Atlantic dropped by 67%. U-boat kill rates plummeted. The German Naval Command couldn't understand what had changed. They investigated their own security procedures. never suspecting that a teenage typist was exploiting their operator's bad habits. In December 1943, Margaret identified a pattern in messages from U-515, a particularly successful boat that had sunk 8 ships in October. The operator was using his mother's birthday as a rotor position. Margaret predicted his next transmission settings. The bombs cracked his message in 47 minutes. The decrypt revealed U-515's position and patrol area. The Royal Navy destroyer HMS Anthony hunted the submarine for 2 days and sank it on December 9th with depth charges. 47 crew died. Margaret typed the after-action report. She never thought about the men inside the submarine. She only thought about the merchant sailors who would live. By March 1944, British naval intelligence was reading 85% of U-boat traffic within 12 hours of transmission. The Battle of the Atlantic had turned. Dönitz, commander of the U-boat fleet, began withdrawing boats from patrol. The wolf packs that had nearly starved Britain into surrender were beaten. The convoys got through. The D-Day build-up proceeded without catastrophic losses. Margaret never received credit. Her work was classified Top Secret Ultra, the highest security designation at Bletchley Park. The Official Secrets Act she'd signed when she was 15 meant she couldn't speak about her work for 50 years. Even within Bletchley, her contribution was known only to Wickham, Travis, and the bomb operators in Hut 8. In May 1944, Margaret was transferred to Hut 4. The naval section focused on German surface vessels. Her techniques were applied to Kriegsmarine fleet communications. Between June 1944 and April 1945, her pattern recognition identified operator habits that led to the decryption of over 1,400 German naval messages. Naval historians later calculated that intelligence derived from those decrypts contributed to the sinking of 53 German vessels, including 12 U-boats, 17 destroyers, and 9 supply ships. The number was probably higher. The intelligence web was too complex to track every connection. A decrypt Margaret helped crack might reveal a convoy route. That route adjustment might put a destroyer group in position to encounter a U-boat. The U-boat sinking wouldn't credit the typist who'd recognized an operator's habit 3 months earlier. War is too chaotic for clear attribution, but 53 vessels was the conservative, documented count. 53 ships that went to the bottom because a 16-year-old girl learned to see patterns that trained mathematicians missed. None of this appeared in official records. The Bletchley Park contribution to the war effort remained classified until 1974. When the secret finally emerged, historians focused on Alan Turing and the bomb machines. Margaret Lindsay wasn't mentioned. She was a footnote in a classified memo, nothing more. Margaret left Bletchley Park on May 15, 1945, 1 week after VE Day. She was 18 years old. The government paid her travel expenses back to Kettering and gave her an official letter thanking her for clerical services to the Crown during wartime. The letter made no mention of cryptanalysis or intelligence work. Margaret returned home and told her family she'd been typing reports for the military. That was all they ever knew. In June 1945, Margaret took a secretarial position at the Kettering shoe factory where her father worked. She typed invoices, correspondence, inventory reports. She married in 1948, a man named Robert Hayes who worked in factory maintenance. They had 3 children. Margaret never told Robert what she'd done during the war. The Official Secrets Act didn't expire, and Margaret didn't feel her contribution was worth discussing. She'd been a typist. She'd done her job. She worked at the shoe factory for 37 years, retiring in 1982 at age 55. Her children knew she'd worked at some government facility during the war, but Margaret deflected questions. "I typed reports," she said. "Nothing interesting." Her daughter once pressed her about the Official Secrets Act paperwork in Margaret's bureau drawer. "Were you a spy or something?" Margaret laughed. "Hardly. I couldn't even drive a car. What kind of spy can't drive?" In 1991, Margaret attended a Bletchley Park reunion. The facility had been scheduled for demolition, but a preservation effort had saved it. The reunion brought together veterans of Station X, most now in their 70s and 80s. Margaret walked through Hut 8 for the first time in 46 years. The typewriters were gone, the desks were gone. It was just an empty room with peeling paint and water damage. At the reunion dinner, Commander Wickham's son gave a speech about his father's work at Bletchley. Thomas Wickham had died in 1978, never publicly discussing his cryptanalysis career. His son mentioned the breakthroughs in naval enigma decryption in late 1943. He thanked the unnamed codebreakers who'd turned the Battle of the Atlantic. Margaret sat in the back and didn't introduce herself. After the speech, Catherine Walsh found Margaret. Walsh had been a bombing operator in 1943, one of the women who'd run Margaret's rotor predictions through the machines. Walsh was 81 years old, walking with a cane. She recognized Margaret immediately. "You're the girl who broke the U-boats," Walsh said. Margaret shook her head. "I was a typist." "You saved thousands of lives," Walsh said. "You know that, don't you?" Margaret didn't answer. They talked about the weather and the reunion schedule. When Walsh pressed about Margaret's post-war life, Margaret said she'd worked in a shoe factory. Walsh looked at her for a long time. "I suppose that's fair. I worked at a grocer after the war. We all went back to normal, didn't we?" "We did," Margaret said. In 1996, a historian researching Bletchley Park's naval section found a classified memo in the National Archives. The memo, written by Commander Travis in November 1943, detailed an unorthodox cryptanalysis technique developed by M. Lindsay, junior staff, Hut 8. The memo praised the technique's effectiveness and recommended its expansion to other sections. The historian tracked down Margaret through military pension records. She was 69 years old, living alone in Kettering. Robert had died in 1993. The historian, Dr. Philip Cartwright from Cambridge, visited Margaret in her small terraced house. He asked about her work at Bletchley. Margaret served tea and biscuits and said she'd been a typist. Dr. Cartwright showed her the Travis memo. Margaret read it quietly. Then she set it down. "I'd forgotten about that," she said. "You don't remember breaking the U-boat codes?" Dr. Cartwright asked. "I remember typing a lot," Margaret said. "The work was classified. I can't really discuss it." "The work was declassified in 1974, Dr. Cartwright said. "You've been allowed to speak about it for 20 years. Margaret seemed surprised. "I didn't know that." Dr. Cartwright spent 3 hours interviewing Margaret. She remembered details with startling clarity: the date of the first U-592 decrypt, the names of bombing operators, the layout of Hut 8. But she struggled to articulate why her techniques had worked. "I just saw patterns," she said. "I don't know how to explain it better than that." Dr. Cartwright included Margaret's story in his book, The Secret War at Station X, published in 1998. The book dedicated 6 pages to Margaret's contribution. It noted that her pattern recognition techniques had preceded modern cryptanalytic computer algorithms by 40 years. It calculated that her work had contributed to sinking at least 53 German vessels and saving an estimated 4 Allied seamen. The book received minimal attention outside academic circles. Margaret received 3 copies from the publisher. She gave 2 to her children and kept 1 on her bookshelf. Her grandchildren asked if the book made her famous. "Hardly," Margaret said. "I was one of thousands at Bletchley, nothing special." Margaret Lindsay Hayes died on February 8, 2004, at age 76, from complications of pneumonia. Her obituary in the Kettering Evening Telegraph mentioned her 40-year career at the shoe factory and her volunteer work at the library. It made no mention of Bletchley Park or cryptanalysis. The obituary noted she was survived by 3 children and 7 grandchildren. At her funeral, Dr. Cartwright gave a brief eulogy. He told the assembled family and friends that Margaret had helped win the Battle of the Atlantic. He explained about U-boats and convoys and code-breaking. Margaret's youngest daughter later said the family had no idea. "We knew she'd worked for the government during the war, but she never said she'd done anything important. She always said she'd just been a typist." In 2009, Bletchley Park opened a permanent exhibition on the women of Station X. Margaret's photograph appeared on a wall display, one of dozens of women who'd worked in the huts. The caption read, "M. Lindsay, cryptanalyst, Hut 8, 1943-1945. The display noted her development of operator pattern recognition techniques that enhanced naval enigma decryption. Visitors spent an average of 30 seconds in front of the display before moving on. The display is still there. Margaret's face, captured at 16 in a staff photograph, looks out at museum visitors. She's wearing her taped glasses and a simple dress. She looks like exactly what she was, a working-class girl who got hired to type. Nothing in the photograph suggests genius. Nothing suggests that her pattern recognition ability would help sink 50 German ships and save thousands of lives. But that's the truth of most innovation in war. It doesn't come from brilliant generals or decorated heroes. It comes from ordinary people who noticed something nobody else saw. A typist who recognized patterns, a mechanic who improved engine efficiency, a cook who developed better food preservation, small insights that cascade into strategic advantage. Margaret never considered herself a hero. When Dr. Cartwright asked if she was proud of her wartime contribution, she said, "I did what needed doing. Everyone did." That's how we won, wasn't it? Everyone doing their bit. She was 16 years old when she started, 18 when she finished. Between those years, she helped change the course of the Battle of the Atlantic. Then she went home and typed invoices for 37 years. No medals, no recognition, no fame. Just a quiet life in the town where she was born. The 53 ships she helped sink took over 2 EWO-0 German sailors to the bottom of the Atlantic. Those sailors had families who mourned them. Those families believed their sons and husbands died fighting for their country. In a different telling, Margaret is a villain. In this telling, she's a hero. The truth is probably that she was neither. She was a girl who could see patterns, who used that skill when her country needed it, and who then returned to normal life without dwelling on what she'd done. If this story moved you, if you're amazed that a 16-year-old typist helped win the Battle of the Atlantic while trained mathematicians struggled, then hit that like button. These stories matter. The heroes we forget deserve to be remembered, even if they were humble, even if they never sought recognition, even if they spent their lives working in shoe factories and raising families. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story about the people who changed history without meaning to. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Do you have family who served in World War II? Did someone in your family work in a quiet, unrecognized way that mattered more than anyone knew? We want to hear your stories. Margaret Lindsay Hayes died believing she'd done nothing special. But the 4,000 sailors who made it home because convoys were rerouted, because U-boats were sunk, because a teenage girl saw patterns in chaos, those men got to live full lives. They had children and grandchildren, they grew old, and none of them ever knew they owed their lives to a typist from Kettering who was too humble to accept credit. That's how real innovation works in war. Quietly, uncelebrated, forgotten, until someone like you listens to a story like this and decides it's worth remembering. Thank you for keeping Margaret's memory alive.